What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Surf and Sales podcast. We are here just after Memorial Day. Are you tired, Richard?
I'm always tired. I'm at that stage. Yeah, I'm over 50. I'm always tired.
Yeah,
I need a sweater and a nap.
24/7 sweaters and naps. Yeah.
I'm not on the sweater stage, but definitely the napping things.
Well, you're listening to Scott Leese here with my good friend and partner and co-founder of the Surf and Sales Summit, Richard Harris. And we're here today with a guy that we've never really spent much time with. We sort of know of each other, but we don't really know each other. And he's equally skeptical of us, I think. So we'll see where this goes. But yes. He's the head of strategic sales North America over at Pigment. And it is Ryan French, also known as Ryan from Detroit. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Appreciate you, gentlemen. And Richard, to your sweater and a nap comment. Mentally transitioning some things right now. And this weekend up north at the cabin, I took 3 naps on a Saturday. I never get a single nap, and it was awesome. My wife just left me alone.
So my goodness. Cool. That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
3 naps in one day. That's called being hungover.
Yeah. I'm like, how's that even possible?
There was no alcohol involved, but there were lots of kids movies and and just letting the blanket and the river air kind of cool, you know.
That's really nice, man. That is.
Well, tell everybody a little bit about what your role is right now, Ryan. Not so much about the company necessarily, but like your role. What do you do specifically?
What is it that you say you do here? So leading the strategic segment for North America, helping build that go-to-market, build the team, sort of start from the ground up on that strategic side of the house for Pigment. I've spent about 6 or 7 years now building in tech, all focused on go-to-market sales as an IC and moving to leadership. I was in leadership prior to tech sales, and we get into that later. But really trying to push forward and focus on landing, number one, the best talent, sales talent in the world. Building a team, as you all know from your extensive history, is incredibly difficult, even if you've got great people that will work with you or follow you to different companies. But going through 60, 70 interviews to try to pick those 7 key individuals that are going to help you build sort of the empire on behalf of the company has been sort of my focal point, the first part of this gig. And then the second part is really getting after the Fortune 100 companies out there, which is incredibly difficult to prospect into. Happy to say that beginning of the year, our team was able to land a marquee logo and close the biggest deal in company history. So we're well on our way, and several more in the hopper. We've had lots of wins as a company, but as a team specifically going after those really big whales, as everyone says. We have a really solid value prop for the enterprise customers and these G2K customers. So just trying to love and serve people and use technology as sort of that mobile to sort of get us from point A to point B and find a joint venture. How are we prospecting into the Fortune 100? Richard and I are brand new salespeople on your team. It's training day 1. Scott raises his hand. He asks the stupid question: how do we prospect into the Fortune 100? What are you telling us? The first thing you do is go and hire an amazing growth and BDR team. So I'll say that's number 1, right? Outside of the basics, we don't have to prospect, Richard. We have somebody else do it.
No, exactly.
I did not say that.
BDR team.
Listen, everyone that I was able to pull into the team and sort of support the effort and the mission were all President Clubs winners, top of their game at respective companies like Salesforce and Clary and Alteryx and Anaplan, all these big companies. But all of them knew 40, 50% minimum outbound coming into the company. So even though these are seasoned sellers that have had wild success at other companies, they knew rolling up their sleeves and coming in was going to be tough.
All right, before we go into like, what do we do to prospect in 2024? How do you determine the real reps who will legitimately prospect 40% of their business? Because that is a tough, like, everybody says they do it. Everybody thinks they can do it. And everybody thinks it's like, oh, they'll just bring their previous client list with them as for prospecting. What's the difference between a real rep who knows how to a closing rep who knows how to full cycle prospect into Fortune companies and those who don't?
Very tough question. I'll give it my best crack since we found some success there. it's going to sound a little cheesy, but I think you actually have to have real conversations with these individuals that you're trying to bring on and understand the character of the person. Like there's folks on the team that came in that hadn't really gone, to the phones, if you will, in several years, even though they had massive success, but they weren't just sitting at the top of their game at a Salesforce and leads were just coming in, right? These were scrappy individuals that were entrepreneurs at heart that just chose to build their franchise inside of a logo instead of going and building their own business like you guys have done, sort of both on both sides of it. So it really is character and drive. I mean, there's a gentleman I had on the team, or have on the team, who spent his first half of his life in San Francisco, but as a school teacher. And there is no one in the world I've ever met, to be candid, that can research the company and put it all up here. And again, I was looking at one of the podcasts, Scott, when you had the SL hat, then Salt Lake. So I was in Austin. I saw
your post. You took a picture of the Salt Lake sign.
Yes. And the commentary in the post was about this gentleman who, truthfully, in t-shirts and in a t-shirt and flip-flops, we're eating some barbecue, sort of post-mortem on the company we were over there to get into, one of the largest in the world with the biggest sales force. Great conversations, great run with their leadership team. And he's just rattling off the earnings call numbers, what their initiatives are, but not like ChatGPT, give me your top 4. Like really understood their business. And the comments we've received on the customers and companies he's talked to are like, there's no one I've talked to that knows our company better than you, right? So you're not going to lose this deal based on a lack of preparation or research. So back to your comment, Richard, the question is looking for those folks that have that je ne sais quoi, character traits and grit and ability that really want to make a difference and want to be mission driven. And it sounds a little soft, but it's not, because even the folks that hadn't done it in a couple of years, they're willing to dig in and learn quick. And so that's sort of the character of the people, regardless of their age and how long they've been successful in sort of running this game. It's almost like a Tom Brady type thing. Like love him or hate him, right? It's the dude was crushing it at the game of football because he was a studious individual who loved the game, loved the sport. So these guys and gals are always figuring out a better way to do things. And then if you want to get to the tactical side of it, it's what everybody expects, right? Like there's smart ways to prospect this nowadays. And I love Brendan and the commentary that he puts on this of like, if you show up to a customer or conversation and you have to do hours of discovery to figure out what they want, then you're not on my team. Like that's what he said in one of the recent conversations with, I think it was Harry on 20VC. So I think people are showing up doing the work and they're living and breathing this stuff because they want to know for a fact that if we're going to get that at bat, like we're going to swing and we're not going to get a single. We're going to connect with the ball and we're going to at least do, hit a double, if not get around the bases. So there's a lot that goes into it, but it's everything that we all have known to do. Tiering our account, all the normal stuff of tiering your accounts, figuring out where you're going to go, what's your insertion point, teaming up with your BDR, like it's like your brother or your sister, right? And talking daily and getting after it together and figuring out how you're going to divide and conquer. But then it's being incredibly smart on the emails that you send and knowing that the emails probably aren't going to get you a reply rate. It's the cold call that's going to get it to you, or it's the warm intro through LinkedIn or through another connection point. But then it's making sure that you're extremely compelling and you don't sound like everyone else. And that's something that, back to your point, Scott, on the Ryan from Detroit moniker, like that's part of my makeup of being here is because I didn't belong in tech sales and no one really wanted to give me a shot. So I kind of had to figure it out myself. And that was through almost 1,000 videos on LinkedIn, creating a brand and showing people how different matters.
I love that. You sort of knock the door down for yourself through that mechanism. So tell us a little bit about that. What sounds like one of the reasons you started with all those videos was to break into tech, to show people that you were a part of modern selling and, a student of the game and all this kind of thing. So talk to us a little bit about that video journey. I would give Richard and I like a D plus in terms of video, execution. Neither of us do very many of them. So I don't think we're really any good at it. right?
I'm too busy napping.
I wish, and one day I'll be able to say the same, not just on a Saturday, but I know a guy if you need any help. So it's really funny. I was leading a small division along with my operational director for Fortune 200, and so I had sales and technical, so program management. This was outside of tech. This was automotive days, selling car parts to the American people because that's who I am and that's what I care about for the Tommy Boy fans out there. But I had a manager, global director, who meant well, but was one of those engineers that just kind of fell into leadership and didn't really do a great job of it, but like tried hard and worked really hard, long hours. And to cut to the chase, because we'll be here a long time, he took a different role, let's say. And my executive team came to me and said, okay, now that there's no gap, what are the real numbers? Tell me, what does your sales file say that you're going to go and get this year? And our division was about a $25 million division in North America. I had 4 salespeople at the time. And I said, we can go get 3.9 million is our number. Again, 10, 15 cent car parts, right? We're going to try to go get 4.4. And they said, well, the number we already gave to the leadership is 7.7. I was like, well, that's probably why there's someone not here right now. And the comment was, just do your best. We'll take it easy on you. I'm like, my team's not going to be motivated to bonus. Like, what are you talking about? So I was in Chicago. I spent every month there, and I was in a Holiday Inn, and I was doing what every young man does when you're frustrated and you're looking for an outlet, and you get on your phone, you start doom scrolling LinkedIn for a new job, right? Start doom scrolling LinkedIn for a new job, although I've never applied for a job on LinkedIn, which is crazy. But I noticed this thing in like October 2017 called LinkedIn Video. And it was the first time that LinkedIn had introduced video. If I got my timing right, it's right around then. And I'm sitting in a Holiday Inn, like scrolling through, and I'm like, these suck. These are the worst videos I have ever seen.
Those were probably ours, Richard.
That's what I was gonna say. They're probably ours.
all the top sales leaders in tech were like, no. So everyone was in their car. The quality was terrible. I had a background in photography. I ran a photography business at 17. I was a wedding photographer, entrepreneur, as I went through engineering school and all that. And so I turned my phone on and recorded a video, a little bit like Ryan from Detroit, as people know me now, and a little bit Michael Scott. And so some people didn't get it because it was really dry humor. And I put the video, I just hit go. And I had this like dopamine hit. And I was like, oh man, I think it's been about a decade. I think it's time to turn the creative back on. And so I made a deal with myself. If I make 10 of these videos on my phone and I'm still doing it and I'm liking it, then I'll go take my old film equipment and I'll sell it and I'll upgrade to some used digital stuff. So that's exactly what I did. And then what I realized is if I want to have an opportunity or a sort of an end story that is outside of automotive, I got to go make some connections and really work with people that are outside my circle of influence. So I spent a solid part of a year and a half as my second job. I have my wife and I are high school sweethearts. And I have 2 kids, 15 and soon to be 17-year-old. So they go to bed at 10:30 and I'd be up until 2 a.m. making videos, connected on LinkedIn in the backside on DMs, talking to people across the pond in Europe and Australia. And that's just started building that Ryan from Detroit following and my connection. And all I did was give away everything. Anything they needed, I could help with.
And it's not all you did. You also put in 3 to 4 hours a night at a time of night that most people are doing nothing whatsoever. So you got to give yourself some credit because you went the extra mile in order to make that happen. Right.
I appreciate that.
Well, I hope people hear that because some of us are a little allergic to hard work, let's just say these days. And we think things should be a little easier than they are in reality. And it takes time to perfect stuff and it takes a Herculean effort sometimes. So good job to you for making that happen, Ryan.
So how did you, who gave you your first shot into tech sales? What was that like?
Funny enough, and I don't want to get in trouble for saying this, but hey, we make our own destiny. Through the video, through some connections, through a gal named JT O'Donnell, who was a big recruiter voice on LinkedIn, top voice. She was connected to Mike Gampson, who was the VP of sales at LinkedIn and SVP of sales. And something he said about the college he went to, because I was self-taught in photography, put myself through engineering school at a little University of Detroit school, and all paid for on my own. And so Mike said, hey, a bunch of these big tech companies are recruiting from all the big schools, and they're missing out on great talent because he went to a small college up in the Northeast. And so I sent a note to JT. I'm like, hey, can you introduce me to Mike? What he said resonated. I just want to thank him. And so she's like, absolutely, Mike, introduced me on LinkedIn. And I kid you not, the next day, no, I'm sorry, later that night, I'm driving home and I get a Chicago area code phone call, and it's Mike Gamson. And I pick up the phone, we start talking. We talked for about 25 minutes. He kind of like knew game. He knew I had it. And he said, look, man, if you want a spot at LinkedIn, I'll help you at least get the interview. And I said, look, man, I'm already working with some folks in Detroit, and I greatly appreciate you. If I need you, I'll come back to you. But I didn't want to take advantage. And so fast forward through a lot of, again, grit and hard work and paying for lunches to people to get information. I got the interview. I came back over a weekend, got the soft job offer from LinkedIn. And at the same time, I was trying to help a guy out who had a startup. I had nothing. There was no equity play, no future like in my mind, like I'm going to go get this. I paid for a dinner in Chicago, sat down with him. He was on my heart, met him on LinkedIn. He was going to relaunch his product. I was like, I think you're charging too little. Give me a couple of days. I'll go to my operational friends that would be buyers of this. Let me get some data for you. He's like, okay. So I did it. And through that, my operational director at the company I was at had just met with his buddy who used to work with him at CAT, who is now the VP of supply chain at Anaplan. And so I call him up in my driveway here just to get some info. I'm like, hey, no strings attached. I just want to know for this guy. And 20 minutes in, he's like, hey, have you ever thought about working in tech? And I was like, every day of my life since college. Like, I'm not leaving Michigan.
He networked his way in.
And so he helped me. And he was like, and there's another story to that. I had an old SAP VP that was a really smart guy. And he drove the Porsche at one point. And he was like, you're not cutting your teeth under me. And he turned me down twice, and I still found my way in and became number one on the team.
Now, would you hire somebody onto your team who did not have tech experience?
I did. I have done that. Yeah.
So I just want to ask the question once again for everybody to listen.
100%.
You're selling Fortune 100 and you have hired people with no tech experience in. Yes.
Yeah.
Tell everybody why.
Because there are industries out there that are really, really, really tough to sell in and to work in. And there's just an element of grit sometimes that you can't get outside of folks that are just so hungry. And so I would rather have those folks that are hungry for knowledge and experience. They're great people. They love and serve their customers. Like, they won't do anything shady because they're going to do what's right for the customer, even to the point where sometimes you push back on your company and your teams to say, hey, I know this is what you need and you want it in cycle or in this quarter. But if you just let me continue to build this relationship for 4 more months, this will be a $2 million deal versus a $450K deal. And so it's that, but it's also like this guy I'm talking about in particular, different guy, but the one that you and I are talking about right now, he worked in the food industry and he was a manager at Cisco Foods. And this guy, when he got promoted to manager, found the best person at Cisco Foods, paid for his own ticket down to Florida to live with the guy for a month just to shadow him. I'll take that guy all day over someone that shows me a sales resume of like.
Did you ever have a rep ask if they could move in with you, Richard, so you could learn, so they could learn from you? That is next level.
No, that almost feels creepy. But maybe in today's age it is. So I want to shift gears on you a little bit. And I love that you're sharing all this stuff, and I love the stories about grit. And it is, how do you define grit? And it's like, well, what's the hardest thing you've ever done, or what's the most you've ever put, whatever, effort you put into something, whether it was sales, and you certainly walk the walk, putting in all that effort, from midnight till 2 a.m. after the kids are down and stuff like that. So it's great to recognize that. I think that's the first thing people have to understand is you've got to recognize what that piece is. I want to shift questions though. To, you're selling into big Fortune deals, right? You just said, hey, this is going to go from a few $100,000 to a couple of million, right? I have so many questions around this. One, how do you get your company off your back to not go after the few 100,000? Because if you're at a tech company, they don't want to wait 18 months, right? Like, look, if you work for Dell and they're like, oh, it's a $400,000 deal, but we'll wait 2 years and we'll get 2 million. A company like Dell could wait, right? Like, you know, a big company. How do you manage up within your organization and to grow the deal to a bigger size? And sometimes it could be from 20 grand to 100 grand, right? Like it doesn't have to, but what have you learned about that?
So number one, I think people miss out on the opportunity to bring executives in early. I know this is like cliche and people talk about it, but like if you truly team sell these deals, then you're not hiding from your executive team on this. Like they can see and understand the way that you're driving those cycles, and you got to work for people you trust, which I always have, right? So like you can have those honest conversations where you're not just a yes man or a yes girl, and say, look, like here's what's on the table. And then typically I would say these are smart people, smart leaders, like they get it, right? Like, and they understand as long as you can lay down the facts, like you got to be good at your job and you have to be really good at doing your due diligence. Like if you don't have a track record and you can't show show your work, then you might be in trouble. You might have to take that couple 100K deal, that 6-figure deal. I think that's number one. The second thing is, and this is a little bit of a spin, but I think a lot of, especially young sellers that I've dealt with, they miss out on the opportunity to get really creative on the pricing. Pricing is such a friend for good sellers. Like you can get in on a company that wants to do that you can get to 2 or 3 million over the next 12 to 18 months, but there's no reason you can't work in, call it whatever you want. People have, think of POCs and pilots as a bad name sometimes, but call it a starter deal, call it whatever you want, and make it compelling enough that you're going to pour all of your resources into that company to support them. But there's got to be a little bit of a give get. And if you've built the relationships well, it's not 100%. Like none of these things in sales is 100% or it'd be easy. I think you can sort of step function a deal in there. And then future state, I mean, you can work with finance and get creative on ripping and replacing or sort of discounting back a portion of that deal for the larger deal. But I think people just hear a customer say one thing. And I think that's where, like, not to get deep, but like you think about Steve Jobs and you think of the marketing world that they've lived in. And it's not about building what the customers thinks they want. It's what that they're going to need in X amount of months or years. So I think you just have to be really creative around those things, but you have to keep executives close so they know what you're doing. That's my experience, at least.
I got one more question about these big deals too. What do people get wrong about procurement? You're working a big deal, right? A couple 100,000, get to 1 million, and procurement. What do people? And part of the reason they don't know, in my belief, is nobody's ever taught us, right? There's no procurement training out there, so to speak.
Yeah.
What have you learned just from experience about working with procurement departments?
Well, I've had the good fortune, I'm saying that sarcastically, but good fortune of working with some of the toughest procurement folks in the world when you're trying to sell into Ford Motor Company and General Motors and all of their sub suppliers. Like,
but they don't know it's Ryan from Detroit. They don't know it's Ryan from Detroit they're talking to.
Eventually, LinkedIn gets to them. But no, I mean it's old school, like shut the door sometimes, and things are flying, and the explicatives are all over the place. So like, I think people are kind of soft these days, if I'm being honest. So I think that's number one. But the second thing is you have to make a champion out of them. Figure out what do they want? What do they want out of this?
So tell people what that, like, you and I agree 100% on this. You almost have to redo discovery for your procurement department, right? So what do you mean when you say, well, you have to make a champion out of them? What does that mean?
Lemkin says it really well. I've seen it flow through LinkedIn multiple times when you talk about, not that we've done this, but when you talk about buying people out of their current spend, when you look at sort of overlap of like, okay, we're a longer sales cycle in general on enterprise play, and everything I've done in tech has always, the enterprise side of the house or the strategic side of the house was always these longer plays. So you have to figure out and get them to tell you like, hey, I'm here to help you, when they realize that you're not just the salesy face and you actually have some depth to you and you've thought through their problems financially. Like, hey, I understand you want to do work with us and you want to unseat this incumbent, but I also understand you have a contract that's going to it's going to continue through the next 13 months. let's have a conversation on what that looks like. How do we phase in? How do we ramp a deal? Is it ACV for you? Or is it TCV, right? Is it productivity over the 3 years? Like, what is it that gets you excited and gets your leadership excited?
How do you get, so let me back up 1 second. How do you get to procurement 13 months before a contract shows up? Because so often, and again, I think it's in tech sales where we're very, we're very transactional. Even our enterprise deals feel transactional compared to what you're talking about. So people are afraid to even ask to get into procurement in those situations. And I agree with you. I think procurement wants to be involved a whole lot sooner. Right. But how do you
making enemies?
How do you get to procurement, 9 months, 12 months before a contract is up? Because is your internal champion willing to do that? Like when you find, or when you do it well and you find the right champion?
I will say yes, not always. I mean, we know this. Like, I know you know the answers to some of these things, but I'm thinking of some examples that I won't name names or companies, but where you realize that, let's say on a $4 or $5 million spend that they have over several years, that your product is equally as good, if not better, is more agile, is quicker to develop and quicker to deploy. There's true value there, and there's an overall TCO comparison that is substantially less, so that they're not necessarily spending less with you from a licensing standpoint, but they're right-sizing their contracts. And so if they can right-size their contracts because there's a ton of bloat on the others, then they can spend in line with what would be expected with you, but you're not giving some heavy discount that's taking you below the incumbent or below the other competitors there. And I think as you roll into those conversations where you're driving paperwork discussions and you're driving terms and conditions, even though there's a legal aspect to that, I think getting procurement through that MSA process early on, if it's a new customer, or starting to really put a business plan together that's not like, here's a great ROI. It's like, understand the full footprint. Like, they're spending money on services and licensing and,
how do you
software.
get to that procurement? How do you get to that procurement person 13 months ahead of time?
You find the folks in IT that sort of straddle that procurement office. A lot of the big companies have that, where there's like an IT procurement or an IT legal team, and you make sure your champion sees enough value in what you're trying to give them, that they're willing to have that conversation up front, because they know that the long pole in the tent is a 16-month runway to the end of a contract, where they need to start informing those people now. And so you just need to educate those folks, I think, early on, meeting the champions of like, hey, let's get this stuff in front of them and at least have the conversation, so we're landing on the right price point and the right terms and all those types of things.
How do you test whether somebody has the patience for this type of environment? Because you guys are talking about sending stuff to procurement 13
Scott, you already
months
failed.
from now.
There's that D.
I literally could not tell you a single thing that I might be doing 13 months from now, let alone being in this same role, selling this same deal. So I would fail the test for sure. But what is the test to understand whether or not somebody has what it takes to do sales of this length and duration? It's got to be a crucial part of the hiring process.
I would, this is my opinion. My off the top of my head answer could be right, could be wrong. I think in the same way that we bring in executives early, you got to find a way to be compelling enough of a story and a value proposition to these champions that they're willing to bring executives in early as well. Because once it's a top-down push, especially on these large transformational deals across multiple companies, by the way, not just where I'm at now, now that you've got eyes of execs and the CFO or the CRO or even the CIO, there's more of a conversation of like, what is this cost going to look like? What's the true value? Where are we driving from a strategic standpoint? And that's a whole nother art form that we have worked on mastering over the past year or 2 years. That's difficult to do, but if you're persistent enough, I think you can find a way.
How are you vetting that? 2 candidates show up today. One of them is Richard, one of them Scott. All other things, let's say, are equal. How are you vetting out which one of these people has the patience for this type of sale and that long-term kind of thinking? I can't fathom planning a deal for 13, 14, 15 months from now. It is not in my DNA.
Well,
So
what I can tell
I would
you is,
fail. So Richard would be the one that would
well,
get hired. But I just want to know how you would vet a candidate to know whether they have that type of DNA or not.
yeah, I think it's hard, but I think that's one you'd have to lean on experience. Like enterprise planning, EPM, is a very unique, a very unique type of software with very long sales cycles. So folks that have been in that space that understand these large transformational deals, I think they understand. We've had this conversation internally with our friends and folks across, again, multiple companies. But are you trying to are you trying to tag into some like of a discretional budget that's departmental? That's going to be that small piece that we talk about, or is this going to be transformational that you're going to have to get into their annual plan for next year, and you're going to have to build that interest and that momentum over a 12 to 16 month period, which is really hard to do. And it takes a lot of patience and it takes the right mindset to do it. But a lot of these folks have these quick wins along the way of getting to the next champion or getting to the executive or getting these on-site workshops or doing these things that are milestones on your map to get you there. And so they use those as sort of their small wins to get to that bigger win. And I can tell you, that's why it took 70 interviews, pulling in some folks that you've known do it in the past. Of course, you've got great people, but like spending 3.5 months to build a team up to 7 and to 9 people, that was like 70 interviews later. I mean, you're taking 10% of that because they're all great people and your internal and external recruiters are great at bringing in talent, but you got to find these like needles in a haystack. And I think it's hard to put that down on paper.
Yeah.
But when you have enough conversations with people or meet them in person or spend some time over a meal, you start to kind of figure out if they have it or not, I think. And having been in that scrappy place as an IC and like telling your CEO, like, look, I know you want this quarter, but if we can wait a month and a half, this is a $2.1 million deal instead of a 460K deal. Trust me. I think that's the kind of stuff that you start to figure out, and people just have to have the stomach for not chasing after the dollar. Like you're gonna win in the end, you're gonna win big, but you really have to love and serve people in the middle of that, I think. And I think that's hard. That's hard to teach sometimes.
I think every founder would be like, well, let's just do the 400,000, and certainly you can grow it. Like that's,
sure,
they'll just sort of turn it into this, unnatural belief system. So,
well, depending on the stage, for sure. Like, come on, your early stage, like you're taking that 400K deal and you're finding a way to get it, make it bigger.
Totally agree. So we need to wrap, which is what we do when we always sort of ask you what questions do you have for us. But before you do that, how can people get a hold of you? Because you're about to, can we announce what you're doing?
Yeah, go for it. This will be a first.
Right. Ryan's going on sabbatical, which basically means that Scott and I really suck at our jobs because we've never been able to go on sabbatical.
That's true.
Hey, this is the first time in 20 years for me.
The closest thing we've ever gotten to a sabbatical is being able to figure out how to do 2 weeks of surf and sales in November instead of just one.
Yeah. I called in sick one day. That's my sabbatical.
Hey man, I feel you. I've been working a lot. And so the opportunity to take a 1 to 2 month off and just run some experiments is kind of like where my head's at, and then spend the time with the family. And
so where can people get a hold of you?
Easiest place is probably LinkedIn.
Yep.
I don't know if I should do this. I don't know how big this is, but they can hit me on email too, Ryan@RyanfromDetroit.com. That's pretty simple. I'm always open, always available to help. Like people in the industry, they know, like you come to me and you need something and I can help you, I'm going to help you. So no strings attached, but I think that's probably the easiest way.
So what can we answer for you? What questions do you have for us? I'm
curious because I couldn't figure it out. Where did you guys first meet? I mean, you have a lot of experience together, but I want the met in the Salt Lick, back in 1989 story or something like that. When
the short answer is in 2008. I had a opening for a sales manager role on my sales team. I was a VP of sales at this company in the Bay Area, and I hired Richard. Well, I got a friend of ours, got him the interview basically, and I hired him. But the funny part of this is, for 4+ years prior to that, that same friend had tried to get me an interview with Richard, and Richard said no. And he denied. He was, I don't know what his thought process was, but he probably was like, this guy has no experience. No, I'm not interviewing this guy. And then 4 years later, it had come full circle where I'm interviewing him. But we didn't realize the first part until recently, actually.
Yeah.
But
yes, we didn't know that.
That's amazing.
Story. So that's how we met. Yeah.
That's
awesome. That's the easiest version.
So what advice, this isn't for me specifically, but for a lot of folks that I know will probably end up seeing this, like what advice do you have for the young sellers who maybe find their way into tech from unconventional means, maybe didn't grow up through the SDR org, but they kind of see things and they know that the way that they're sort of taught things in sales or in tech sales, it's not, it may be sort of right down the line, but it's not necessarily the way that they think about going about it. Like you guys have certainly carved your own path over a lot of, I'm sure, successes and maybe some failures too, but just a word of encouragement to young sellers who know that they're different and sort of have a creative way of seeing things in life and in sales and see it from a different angle. Like how do you encourage them, or how would you encourage them to go after those things and sort of not compromise their sort of their ethics and their beliefs simply because of coaching?
Well, I think there's a couple things. So first and foremost, particularly right now, it's 2024. Sometimes you're going to take a job that sucks because you need to pay the bills, right? We've all been there. We've all done it. Truthfully, when Scott hired me, that was a job that sucks, but I needed to pay the bills. Had nothing to do with Scott though. That was the whole economic situation. That was like, I'd lost my job. It was 2008. It was a recession, blah, 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 blah. So sometimes you have to do that. So recognize that that's it. Second thing is you got to recognize you're going to have to put in the hard work. You're going to have to spend extra time upskilling yourself, right, and learning. And then third thing is, all the things that you don't like about the way something's done. I was never good at this. I would write them down because I'd want to remember them so that when I do get a chance to be in charge, I can at least reflect on them. Not that I necessarily would change it because maybe I don't have enough wisdom. And then the last thing is to look for the leaders who are willing to let you be creative. I mean, for all things, my favorite thing about having worked with Scott was his creativity for letting people figure stuff out and or encouraging them in ways that they didn't even know how. Like there are countless, and I literally means probably hundreds of people who could say that Scott taught them how to do something they never thought in the world they could ever do, try something they've ever wanted to try before, and literally changed their life. Like literally, like I know these people. And I think we all have that as leaders. We all have that skill. Scott sort of got it at this, calculus, 12x times pi r squared kind of stuff. Skill. So finding those kind of leaders, which takes time, is a part of it. And the last thing I'll say, and I'll let Scott answer, is that the best thing about being a sales rep right now, if I'm new in sales, is that the level of technology that's coming out with AI, I can assure you, if someone who's brand new in sales and is younger, coming out of college, focuses on AI in sales for the next 6 months, they'll be smarter than most of the managers and leaders they ever work with. Like embracing that technology and trying to figure out, because nobody knows what's really going to happen. We all have a lot of, doom and gloom about it, but the person who knows that stuff is going to be the person I think is going to get hired. So,
That's awesome.
I'll shut up there. That was a long answer. Sorry.
No, it's good. I appreciate that.
Yeah. The only thing that I'd say to Richard's point about giving people some freedom to try things and whatnot, they also need to learn the fundamentals though. No, I don't think, and Richard could correct me, but I don't, at least in my memory, recall ever bringing somebody on board and then just letting them do whatever the hell they want.
Yeah, you definitely never let them wing it. But once they earned it, and they figured it out, you would let them do it. 100%.
That's right. So once you learn the fundamentals and you're productive that way, now you've earned the right to get some freedom and flexibility and to try some things, and let's get creative. So I don't want people to forget the fundamentals. And I think that is a little bit of a risk right now.
Yep.
So that's really the only addition that I would add on to what Richard said. Don't completely neglect the fundamentals.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Good
that.
catch.
Last question. What do you two look for in sellers? You asked me the question, but like, what do you see? What are you looking out for in sellers or leaders that attract you to them?
Scott's is tequila preference.
From a seller perspective, it's very contingent upon the role and the sale and the company. I'd look for something different if I was hiring Fortune 100 people versus, transactional sellers selling $500 a month services or whatever. But I've always said that what I care about the most is like who this person is in front of me and where they want to go and how committed they are to getting there. Why are they willing to do now what they've previously been unwilling to do? And so I always tried to surround myself as best I could with a team whose general makeup was like seizing the moment, appreciation for opportunity, sense of urgency, willingness to learn, and just like, I don't ever want to go back to where I was. It was hell. Boom, this is where I want to go. So I didn't optimize for experience or background or industry expertise or resume. I never cared about that stuff. It was just like, who's Richard? What's he all about? What does he want to be when he grows up? And can I help him get there? And do I believe he's willing to do whatever it takes? And the more of those kind of people I surrounded myself with, I felt like the better we would do. So that's from a seller perspective. Maybe Richard can give an answer around what type of leader to look for. That's a harder one.
Yeah. If we should, Scott, one day we should record why you even hired me in the first place. What happened in that interview? Like seriously, like I'd be curious to know that.
I don't know if I remember. It's a long time ago.
Yeah. So I think, sort of in a different sort of more structured answer. And I agree with everything Scott said. Like that's one of those things that I learned from Scott along the way. Because I was brought up with the resume skill and where they were before and how much experience they have and how competitive are you, and not that those things are wrong, just it was too much of a cookie cutter formula.
Yeah.
The other thing that I look for is coachability, and there's two sides of that coin. There's their ability to coach. I'm sorry, their ability to be coached, but then their ability to coach others. Because, right, as salespeople, we are supposed to be the biggest instigators of change, right? That's our job. Yet we're the hardest people to change ourselves. And I think this is why, and you alluded to it earlier, which is why I always love hiring teachers, right? Like if a teacher can break down something for a third grader to understand, I know that they have the innate skill set to break down something much more complex, right? And now, does that mean they can go sell engineering airplane parts? Not yet, no. But they have this ability to see that objection as something to work through more naturally, because kids all like, I don't understand and I don't get it. So teachers to me are a big piece. So any level of teaching component where they've taught somebody something is really important for a skill set to me. And they don't have to be teachers, right? It's like, how'd you teach your kid to throw a baseball? Like, you got to break that down into fundamentals. Scott knows, right? There's a very specific process, and you got to turn your body this way and shift your arm that way. Or, how do you do a corner kick, right? For soccer. And, that's the kind of stuff I was looking for.
Love it. We're in good company. Football and lacrosse coach here for my son's high school. And so I have definitely taught in university in the past. So I feel you. I feel your brother.
Well, we appreciate you spending time with us today, Ryan. And
thank you.
Wish you all the best of luck. Enjoy some downtime on your sabbatical. And we will see everybody next time on the Surf and Sales podcast.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks a lot, gentlemen.